My wedding day looked like a scene out of a fairy tale until my fiancé's Jonathan's 4-year-old daughter, Mia, stood up mid-ceremony and declared, "Daddy, don't marry her. You already have a wife." Then she pointed to a shadowy figure outside the window. I always dreamed of a wedding day filled with joy, love, and excitement, and as I walked down the aisle, I thought that dream was coming true. The soft glow of candlelight illuminated the room, mingling with the scent of fresh roses. Jonathan stood at the altar, looking as handsome as the day we met. It had been 3 years since we first crossed paths at a friend's barbecue. I wasn't looking for love, but Jonathan's warmth and easygoing nature pulled me in. What began as casual conversations about work and books soon became long evenings filled with laughter. We clicked instantly, and within months I couldn't imagine my life without him. One evening, not long after we started dating, Jonathan dropped a bombshell over dinner. "Abigail, there's something you need to know," he confessed. "I have a daughter. Her name's Mia, and she's 4. I need you to think about whether you're ready for that. Because if this doesn't work for you, I'd rather know now." "A daughter," I echoed. "You have a daughter." The thing is, I hadn't seen this coming. It was not because I thought Jonathan was hiding anything, but because we'd been so caught up in the whirlwind of getting to know each other that it hadn't even crossed my mind. "She's my world, Abigail," he said. "I don't want you or her to be unhappy. If you need time to think this over, that's okay. I need to be upfront about it." I could see the vulnerability in his eyes. I could sense that he was preparing himself for rejection. "I need to think about this," I said carefully. "Not because I'm unsure about how I feel about you, but because I want to be sure I can give her and you what you deserve. That's all I can ask. Take your time." Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about Jonathan's words. I pictured a little girl with Jonathan's warm eyes and wondered what her life had been like. Would she welcome me, or would she see me as an intruder? Was I ready to take on the role of a stepmom? When I finally made up my mind, I asked Jonathan to meet me at our favorite coffee shop. As he sat down, I took a deep breath and said, "Jonathan, I'm in this for the long haul. If Mia is part of the package, then I want to meet her." "Thank you, Abigail," he smiled, feeling absolutely relieved. "That means the world to me." "When can I meet her?" I asked. Jonathan chuckled. "How about this weekend?" he suggested. "She's been asking about you ever since I told her I was seeing someone." The following Saturday, I found myself standing outside Jonathan's house, holding a small bag of cookies I'd baked the night before. My heart was racing as he opened the door with Mia peeking out from behind his leg. "Abigail, this is Mia," Jonathan said warmly, stepping aside. Mia's bright eyes studied me for a moment before she smiled shyly. "Hi," she said, clutching a stuffed bunny to her chest. "Hi, Mia," I replied, kneeling to her level. "I made these cookies for you. I hope you like chocolate chip." "I love chocolate chip," she exclaimed, taking the bag from my hands. From that moment, the ice was broken. Within minutes, Mia was showing me her favorite toys, dragging me to her playroom, and peppering me with questions. Jonathan watched us from the doorway, and his face told me he was super happy. "She likes you," he said later that evening, as Mia dozed off on the couch. "I like her too," I said, smiling. "She's incredible, Jonathan." So, while becoming a stepmom wasn't something I had ever imagined for myself, I couldn't deny that Mia had already claimed a piece of my heart. When Jonathan proposed a year ago, Mia had squealed with delight. "You're going to be my mommy," she'd said, hugging my legs tightly. From that moment, I thought we were on the same page, building a happy little family together. Fast forward to today, I felt incredibly happy seeing Mia beaming in her flower girl dress. Everything was going well until the officiant began the ceremony. "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace," he said. The room fell silent, save for the faint rustle of someone shifting in their chair. I expected the moment to pass uneventfully. Instead, Mia's small voice rang out, clear as a bell. "You can't marry her, Daddy?" A gasp swept through the room, and my heart plummeted. I turned to Mia, stunned. "Sweetheart, what did you say?" Mia stood up from her seat and looked at Jonathan. "Daddy, don't marry her," she said. "You already have a wife." I whipped my head toward Jonathan, expecting an immediate denial, but his expression mirrored my confusion. "Mia," he said gently, "what are you talking about?" Mia pointed to the large glazed window at the back of the room. "She's right there." Every head turned toward the window, where a shadowy figure waved at us. I couldn't understand what was happening. Who was that? Could Mia be telling the truth? I crouched to Mia's level, keeping my voice calm despite the whirlwind in my chest. Sweetheart, I asked, who is that? What do you mean Daddy already has a wife? Mia nodded. That's Daddy's wife, she said with certainty. Jonathan stepped closer to the window, squinting into the fading light. I don't understand, he muttered. Jonathan, I said, what is going on? Who is she? Abigail, I swear I have no idea what Mia's talking about. Mia, he said, crouching to her level, sweetheart, who is that outside? Mia tilted her head, her expression serious but calm. It's your wife, Daddy. She came to the wedding. I heard everyone gasp in harmony. Jonathan, is there something you haven't told me? I asked. Abigail, no, I don't. Just let me see who that is, he said before walking away from the altar. My heart pounded against my chest as I stood there. The murmurs in the room grew louder as he stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Through the window, I could just barely make out Jonathan speaking to the figure. I watched as his body language shifted from tense to, was that amusement? I turned to look at Mia, who was now sitting calmly as if she hadn't just turned the entire ceremony upside down. Minutes later, the door creaked open and Jonathan walked back in, smiling. Beside him was a familiar face. It was Donnie, Mia's former nanny, holding something in her hands. My confusion deepened. Danny? I exclaimed, my voice rising slightly. What are you doing here? Danny stepped forward, her own grin matching Jonathan's as she held up a pink teddy bear. What is that supposed to mean? I asked, glancing between the two of them. Jonathan chuckled, shaking his head as though he couldn't believe the situation himself. Abigail, he said, motioning to the bear, meet Mrs. Fluff. What? I asked, feeling even more lost than before. Mrs. Fluff, Jonathan said, glancing at Mia. When Mia was 3, she decided this teddy bear was my wife. It was this little game we used to play where she'd marry me to the bear, and we'd all laugh. I haven't thought about it in years. Mia clapped her hands, delighted. She's your wife, Daddy. You can't marry Abby if you're already married to Mrs. Fluff. Danny laughed, clearly trying to suppress her amusement. Mia's been watching prank videos on YouTube. She wanted to pull a wedding surprise, and, well, I couldn't resist helping her. The room erupted into laughter as Donnie finished her explanation. Guests who had been whispering in confusion moments earlier were now wiping tears of mirth from their eyes. I looked at Mia, who was smiling. Mia, I said, fighting the urge to both laugh and scold, do you know how scared you made me? It was funny, Abby. Jonathan scooped her up, shaking his head in amusement. Young lady, he began. You've got a lot of explaining to do. Mia giggled, wrapping her arms around his neck. Daddy, you're not mad, are you? Jonathan kissed her forehead and sighed. How can I be? But no more pranks at weddings, okay? Okay, Mia said sweetly, though the mischievous twinkle in her eyes made me wonder just how long that promise would last. I turned to Danny, who was leaning casually against the wall, clearly enjoying the chaos she'd helped create. Danny, you're lucky this turned out to be funny. I'd almost started crying. I know, Danny said, holding up her hands in mock surrender. Mia's been planning this for weeks. She kept saying, Daddy's going to be so surprised. And I couldn't resist. Besides, Mrs. Fluff deserved to make a comeback. That's when the officiant cleared his throat. Shall we continue, now that the matter of the first wife has been resolved, he asked. Jonathan placed Mia gently back in her seat and turned to me. You okay? He asked softly. I smiled, squeezing his hand. Ask me again after the vows. The ceremony resumed, and though the day hadn't gone exactly as planned, it was unforgettable. As we exchanged rings, I glanced at Mia, who gave me a cheeky thumbs up from her seat. As Jonathan and I danced later that evening, I leaned in close and whispered, this might not have been the wedding I imagined, but I think it was even better. He grinned, spinning me gently. What can I say? Life with Mia is always going to be a little unpredictable. And a lot of fun, I added, as I caught sight of Mia dancing with Danny in the middle of the floor, still clutching Mrs. Fluff.